he wanted to do something for her, and Gehazi, his servant, said, well, she doesn't have a son and her husband's getting old. And so Gehazi told her, said, about this time next year, you're gonna have a son. And she's like, oh, please don't toy with me. Don't tell me that if it's not gonna be true. Sure enough, a year later, here come a little bundling boy. Joy, joy, joy. And that little boy, he grew up, and he wasn't very old, but one day when he was out in the field with his daddy working, he got a terrible, terrible headache, and he grabbed his head and he just collapsed, and they ran him to his mother and gave him to his mother. And his mother sat in his room and held him in her arms until he finally died. She took that baby, that young boy, up to the room of Elijah and laid him on the bed. And then she said to the workers, said, fix me up a donkey or whatever you ride on, and I'm going to run real fast to the prophet. So they bundled her up and got her all ready, and she took off. She got close to where Elijah was, and Gehazi came out to meet her, and Elijah wanted to know if everything was well. Is everything okay with you? And is everything okay with your husband? And is everything okay with your son? And she said, it is well. And that always used to stump me. I used to think, well, that little lying thing, she's not telling the truth. It's not all well. I mean, her husband's probably home weeping and crying because his little boy's dead, and the little boy's dead, laying on the bed of the prophet. Why didn't she just come clean and say, no, it's not well, it's awful. Life is awful. You promised me a son, and now here, just few years later, God takes him away. Why would this happen? Why would God even give me a son if he's going to take him away? And why? And all these questions. I'm thinking, why didn't she just come clean? But somewhere down in her heart, she knew that God gave her that son through the prophet. And if God gave her that son through the prophet, no matter what's happening, she knows that God is in control and God knows what he's doing. So she said it as well. Didn't mean that she didn't want her son to live, because she continued to press the prophet. You need to come with me. She fell at his feet. You need to come with me. And he sent the Gehazi and said, go put my staff on his, on his face. And she said, oh, no. You need to come. You need to come. Don't just send your servant. And so she was so insistent, he went with her. Of course, they were behind the servant, and the servant laid his staff on the little boy like the prophet told him to do, and he came back and he said, he's not breathing. There's no breath. There's nothing. So he confirmed to the prophet that the little boy was dead. And yet, God had a miracle. He had a miracle waiting for her up in the prophet's chambers. And after he spent some time with the little boy, he sent for the mother and had her come up, and her little boy was alive again. You see, this song that I heard said that you can stand at the mountain and look at the mountain. You can still say it is well. You can still trust him, because that mountain may be there for a reason. There may be something on the other side of that mountain that you're either not ready for, or that would harm you, or some reason, some good reason why God would not move a mountain that you ask him to move. See, God knows what's on the other side of it. We can't see that. I wish sometimes that I could transcend my body up into heaven, and I could look down and see a space of time bigger than the present. maybe someday I'll be able to when I have a body, like his, when he transforms my body. But right now, I can only see the here and now. And it's only for a second. And then it's gone. And then I'm into a new one. And then I'm into a new one. And as time goes by, that's all I can see is the here and now. But God, he is the I am. He transcends every millisecond. He can see clear back to the beginning of time. And he can also see clear into eternity at one glance. I've heard it said that the reason it's easy for God to meet people at the point of their need. You know the guy comes to church, cries, comes down to the altar, and receives the Holy Ghost, speaks in tongues. God just does a miraculous thing for him. Turns around, walks out the door, and you don't see him for 6 years. Then he comes back. And he comes down to the altar, and he cries, and God refills him with the Holy Ghost, and no telling where he's been and what he's done in between times, but God just douses him with a good Holy Ghost and a good touch, and he's just, yes, I'm going to be back. I'm going to be back next week. I'm on board now. I'm on board. Walks out the door, and you don't see him for another 3, 4 months, 6 months, however long. And then he comes back. And you think, God, do you realize that he's going to just turn around and walk out and not live for you? Do I know you know that. So why do you forgive him when you know he's going to walk out that door and turn his back on you? And I heard someone say the reason God can meet you at the point of your need is because he sees you at the same time he sees the cross. It's at the same time. And he doesn't have to be reminded because he is in eternity. But it is a reminder to us that God sees us in the same point that he sees the price that he paid for us. I'm so thankful for that because that is a beautiful story of grace. His amazing grace. And the only way we receive his amazing grace is through the blood of Calvary. And I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful that when I mess up, when I make a mistake, when I'm not counting my P's and Q's and doing like I should, not reading my Bible like I should, and not praying like I should, and I'm slacking off, and things are coming into my life that I'm allowing to come in, and I'm watching things I shouldn't be watching, and I'm participating in things I shouldn't be participating in, and suddenly I just remember how it feels for God to tap me on the shoulder and draw me back to him. He taps you on the shoulder. He says, wait, remember me? Remember the one that loved you enough to die for you? Remember me? And he forgives us over and over and over again. And so I'm thankful that he can do that, can look at us. At the same time, the shadow of the cross is over us. But I'm also thankful, and this is really hard to say, but I'm also thankful for that mountain. Because that mountain reminds me that I cannot do this alone. That I cannot make it alone. Until we realize that we are helpless, that we are dependent on him, we will be that person that comes back and goes out, comes back and goes out. But when we understand that he is there to help us bear the burden, he's there to help us pick up the load. I've heard it said when people are in the waiting room, maybe in the waiting room because of the death of a loved one. Or I've heard this from people that had been abused as a child say, where was God when? And I know that is a reality struggle, especially when this person has been the one that has been abused or hurt, or someone taken away from them and they couldn't understand it. But I want you to know tonight that God is there. He was there. He is there. He was there. He was there through every pain, through every heartache, through every hurtful thing that happened. God was there. And he was ministering then and there. And when people realize that God never leaves us or forsakes us, and they look back, they will say, yes, I do remember one thing that happened during this horrible time. It was somebody came knocking on the door, and it was a reprieve. It was a moment of relief. It was a moment of freedom. It was a moment that God stepped in. Or it was a time that when somebody that you lost, perhaps to death, through death, and God used someone else to speak a word into your life and to let you know that you are not alone. That he's there, right there with you, going through whatever you're going through. He's right there with you. So sometimes we stand at the mountain. We stand at the foot of the mountain, and we look up. Wow, that is a big mountain. Wow, this is an impossible situation. I don't know, God. I think you can make a road in the wilderness. I think you can part the waters, but I don't know about this mountain. If you can do anything about this mountain. You see, this mountain is my mountain. Now, I know you can move mountains for so-and-so. You can move mountains for Pastor Martinez because he's a good man. You can move mountains for Sister Michelle because she's a praying woman. You can move mountains for Brother Ramirez. He's always shouting the victory and saying, "Ain't that a lot of love?" He just inspires us all. But my mountain is something that, I don't know, the reason it's not gone is probably because I don't have any faith. Probably because I'm not a good person. Probably because I've made mistakes. You see, sometimes we think that we have a mountain because we are responsible for it. It's my fault. It's my fault that I'm in the waiting room. It's my fault that I'm waiting here and over and over and over, and everybody else is getting their name called and is getting to go see the doctor and go see Jesus, and Jesus is just healing them and they're going out the door, and I'm just still sitting here with this great big mountain right in front of me. But God orchestrates the time in the waiting room. And he orchestrates the time that mountain will stand in front of us. He's the one that says, it's going to be here today and gone tomorrow. Or he's the one that says, this mountain will not move. You have to climb it. You have to do some hard work to understand why this mountain is here. I don't know why some have to climb and others it just disappears. I don't understand that. But I do know one thing. That I trust God enough to know that if I'm the one that has to climb the mountain, he's got a good reason. And I have faith to believe that when I get to the top and I'm heading down on the other side, I'll understand it better by and by. And so there's so many facets of the waiting room. There's so many different chairs you can sit in. You can sit in the chair of healing, like Sister Beth did you can sit in that chair. Well, I'm sure that we've all wondered if we'll ever be healed of this, whatever that you need healing from. I've asked the Lord several times to heal me of something, and I remember distinctly one time going down to the altar and asking God to heal me again. And I remember it's almost as if he spoke to me audibly and said, "No, I have a greater plan for you." And I thought, a greater plan than healing me and getting all the glory? But I know now why he did not heal me. He did a work in me he could not have done had I not had that infirmity. And I'm thankful for it. I'm not glad it happened, but I wouldn't trade anything for it, if you know what I mean. You know, and it's caused me some problems along the way, and it's caused me some insecurities and some inferiorities along the way. But let me tell you one thing. It's also taught me how to lean on God when my flesh was weak. And those were precious times. Those were precious times when I felt vulnerable. And I felt like everybody was watching me waller in the mud. I felt like everybody was watching me fail and fail and fail again. And knowing that he picked me up and I could feel his everlasting arms around me and sheltering me and loving me and supporting me through a time that I didn't have the strength to support myself emotionally. I know that sometimes it's easier to look back on those times and say, God saw me through it. Yes, he did. And yes, he did. But when you're in the middle of it, when you're going through it, sometimes we don't really think too straight. You know what I mean? Sometimes we're a little wacko, you know, when we're really going through it, you know, and for us to have multitasking during that time, it's impossible, because all we can focus on is this horrible thing that we're going through. Not everybody understands what we're going through. Sometimes it's hard on other people to understand what you're going through because they're not going through what you're going through. They're not fighting your battle. They're not holding your sword. You're the one that's holding it. And you're the one that has to use it. You can't hand it over to someone else and say, I'm just too weak. I think you need to take this sword and take it and swat somebody with it. I don't have the strength to do it. You know, here, you take my hammer and knock the devil over the head with it because I'm just too weak to do it. I'm just too tired and too weak. But sometimes we feel that way. And then we pick the sword up, and God puts his hand under ours. And he's the one that fights the battle for us. Have you ever been in a position where you just felt so weak and you felt the presence of the Lord move in and strengthen you? You know, I'm getting some nods. Yeah, I've been there. I felt the presence of the Lord come in. I felt the strength of the Lord surround me. I felt like I was going to be okay. So you may have felt vulnerable and in a lot of pain and going through something, but you can also feel the presence of God in those times. Why? Because you're so focused. You're so focused on what's going on that when the presence of the Lord moves in, you're single focused, and he comes in and you're like, I can feel God. I can really feel God. Because everything else around you has taken second place. Everything around you is not so important anymore because you are in the fight of your life. And sometimes the fight of your life takes you past the door of eternity. And when your life takes you past the door of eternity, it changes everything about the life here on this side of eternity. Because once you peer through that door, everything looks different on this side. Your ambitions change. Your purpose changes. Your relationship with God changes. At least for a while, until you get bogged down again. And then he's got another waiting room for you to kind of bring you back. So I was just amazed at how God worked and orchestrated this service tonight. And I would like for us all to stand. I'm going to let us go early, but I wanted to I wanted to just encourage you and let you know that I don't know if you are in the waiting room right now, or if you've been there and you can sing God's praises, or if you're heading in there again. I don't know. But I do know one thing. I know for sure that He has a plan and He has a purpose. And no matter what we're going through, no matter what you're going through, no matter what you're fixing to go through, trust Him. Trust Him to know that He sees the bigger picture. And wherever you are tomorrow, He's already there, waiting. He's preparing you every step to meet Him there at the crisis. And when you get to the crisis, you look back and celebrated every step in their precious God, they would know that He's there. So I want to encourage you today. Jesus is in your crisis. He's already there. And it doesn't have to be as bad as we make it out to be, because He is there to help us, to kind of cushion the fall, He's there. He's already there.